The alarm started at dawn, not the usual morning chimes that woke the colony, but the deep, terrible sound that meant something had gone very wrong. Was already awake in the engineering bay when the first warnings flashed across his screen. He stared at the numbers, hoping he had read them wrong. He checked again, then a third time. His hands felt cold. The star was dying. Not in a billion years like stars were supposed to. Not even in a million years. The sun that gave life to their colony world was collapsing now, and it would take only 6 weeks before it killed them all. Ran to find. She was in the observatory, her face lit by the glow of a dozen screens. She had seen it too. When she turned to look at him, her eyes were wide with fear. "It's real," she said quietly. "I've checked everything twice. The sun is losing mass at an impossible rate. Something inside the core is breaking down." "How long do we have?" asked, though he already knew the answer would be bad. 6 weeks, maybe 7 if we're lucky. After that, solar winds will strip away our atmosphere. The radiation will kill anything that's left. The colony held 340,000 people. Not just humans, but dozens of alien species who had come together to build a new home in the 442 system, with their precise minds, reptilian with their warrior culture, amphibious who brought art and music, and 40,000 humans who had journeyed across the stars looking for a fresh start. Now they were all going to die. The Galactic Council met within hours. Ambassador Riss stood at the center of the Great Hall, her multiple eyes reflecting the emergency lights. She was tall and graceful, with translucent wings that shimmered when she moved. "The evacuation fleet will arrive in 4 weeks," she announced. Her voice carried across the silent chamber. "They will have enough space for 200,000 individuals." The math was simple and brutal. Almost half of them would be left behind. Commander, the military leader, stepped forward. His scales were dark green and his eyes were sharp. "We must decide who goes and who stays. I propose we prioritize by genetic diversity. Each species must preserve their best samples." Riss nodded slowly. "It is logical. We will create a selection committee. They will evaluate each individual based on age, health, and genetic value to their species." Felt sick. He looked around the chamber at the faces of people he knew, his neighbors, his friends. Who would decide which of them deserved to live? Stood up, her voice cut through the murmurs. "There's another option." Every eye turned to her. She was small compared to most of the aliens in the room, but she didn't look away from their stares. "We can fix the star," she said. The chamber erupted in noise. Aliens clicking, hissing, and shouting in a dozen different languages. Commander's tail slammed against the floor, demanding silence. "Impossible," said Dr. Ara, a scientist with blue-green skin. "Stellar stabilization is theoretical at best. The mathematics alone would take years to calculate. We have weeks." "We can do it," said standing beside. "Give us 3 weeks. If we fail, there will still be time for evacuation." Riss approached them. When she spoke, her voice was gentle, almost sad. "I understand your desperation, but this is not possible. Even if the theory was sound, the calculations required would need the most powerful computers in the galaxy running for months. You would need to map every particle interaction in the star's core. You would need to predict quantum fluctuations across billions of cubic kilometers. No species has ever accomplished this." "We've got this," said firmly. "Just give us the chance." Commander shook his head. "I cannot allow it. If you fail, if you somehow make the collapse happen faster, you will kill everyone immediately. The evacuation fleet might not even have time to arrive." "And if we do nothing, half of us die anyway," replied. "You're already deciding who lives and who doesn't. Let us try to save everyone." The debate went on for hours. Most of the alien council members said no. They showed graphs and calculations proving it was impossible. They talked about the millions of years of combined scientific knowledge across the galaxy and how no one had ever stabilized a collapsing star. But 47 humans stepped forward. Engineers, physicists, mathematicians, and programmers. They stood together and refused to take spots on the evacuation ships. "We're staying," said a former military officer who now ran colony logistics. "We're going to try this. If it works, everyone lives. If it doesn't, well, at least we tried." Riss looked at the humans for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. "You are either the bravest species I have ever met or the most foolish. Perhaps both. I cannot stop you from trying, but I also cannot support this officially. If you fail and endanger the evacuation, I will have you arrested." "Fair enough," said. Commander stepped closer, his voice low and serious. "You understand what you are attempting. The odds are impossible. You will almost certainly die, and you may take us with you." Met his eyes without fear. "We're human. Impossible just means it hasn't been done yet." As the council meeting ended, the aliens filed out, most of them shaking their heads or making gestures of disbelief in their various cultures. They went to prepare for evacuation, to organize the selection committees, to decide who would live and who would die. The humans went to work. Stood in the engineering bay, looking at the screens showing their dying sun. Beside him was already pulling up stellar models and quantum calculations. Around them, 45 other humans were taking their positions at workstations, preparing to attempt the impossible. "You really think we can do this?" asked quietly. Smiled, but her hands were shaking as they moved across the controls. "I think we have to try. That's what humans do, right? When everyone else gives up, we're the ones too stubborn to quit." Outside the windows, the sun burned in the darkness of space. It looked normal to the naked eye, beautiful even, but could see the data, the way its light was slowly dimming, the way its mass was bleeding away into nothing. 6 weeks, that's all they had. He took a deep breath and got to work. Around him, the other humans did the same. None of them knew if they would succeed. Most of them knew they would probably die trying. But they had made a promise: "We've got this." Now they just had to prove it. The orbital station had never been used like this before. Watched as his team ripped out walls, tore down decorative panels, and stripped every non-essential system to make room for more computing equipment. They were turning a comfortable space station into a massive calculator, and they were doing it fast. "We need more processing power," said his younger brother. He was a quantum physicist, brilliant with numbers but terrible with people. Right now, his hair stuck up in every direction, and his eyes were red from lack of sleep. "The standard computers can't handle these calculations. The star's behavior is too chaotic." Looked up from her workstation. She had been awake for 36 hours straight. "Then we don't use standard computers. We link everything. Every tablet, every phone, every device on this station. We create a network." "That's insane," said one of the observers who had stayed to watch. "Those devices aren't designed to work together. The processing errors alone would make the data worthless." "Not if we account for the errors in our models," replied. She was already typing commands, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "We build the uncertainty into the math itself." The alien clicked its mandibles in disapproval, but said nothing more. Coordinated the work shifts. She had served in the human military for 10 years before joining the colony, and she ran the team like a military operation. "Team 1, you're on for 18 hours, then 6 hours rest. Team 2 takes over. No one works more than 20 hours in a row." "That's still too much," Dr. Ara said. The scientist had been watching the humans work with growing concern. "Your species needs 8 hours of sleep per cycle. You're pushing your bodies beyond safe limits." "Safe limits are for people who have time," said. "We don't." The first 3 days were chaos. Humans ran from one end of the station to the other, carrying equipment, shouting instructions, drinking massive amounts of coffee. The aliens watched with a mixture of fascination and horror. This wasn't how science was supposed to work. There were no careful procedures, no triple-checked safety protocols. The humans were just doing things. "This is madness," Commander said to Riss as they observed from the command deck. "They're improvising everything. There's no structure, no plan." "Look closer," Riss replied. Her multiple eyes tracked different groups of humans simultaneously. "There is structure. It's just not one we recognize. They're adapting in real time, changing their approach based on what works." His team was mapping the star. They sent probes into the outer layers, gathering data on temperature, radiation, and particle density. It was dangerous work. 2 probes were destroyed by solar flares before they got any useful information. "We're going too slow," said, staring at the screens. "At this rate, we won't have the mapping done in time." "The probes can't get closer," one of her assistants said. "The radiation will destroy them." Thought for a moment, then made a decision that would have gotten her fired from any normal research project. "We don't need complete data. We need good enough data. Send the probes deeper, gather what we can before they burn up. We'll fill in the gaps with statistical models." "That's not scientific," protested an observer. "You're right," said. "It's practical. Science is great when you have time. We don't have time." Was having his own problems. The quantum calculations needed to predict the star's behavior were incredibly complex. Traditional mathematics said they needed to account for every possible quantum state, which was literally impossible. So did something no respectable scientist would do. He threw out the rules. "We're using probability cascades," he announced to his team. "We don't calculate every possibility. We calculate the most likely possibilities and ignore the rest." "That could introduce massive errors," said his assistant. "Yeah," agreed. "But it also might work. And right now, might work is better than definitely impossible." By the end of the first week, the humans had something resembling a plan. They would inject antimatter into the star's core in precisely calculated bursts. The antimatter would react with normal matter, releasing enormous amounts of energy. If they did it right, this energy would reignite the fusion reactions and stabilize the star. If they did it wrong, they would blow up the sun and kill everyone immediately. Presented the plan to the Galactic Council. He showed them the calculations, the models, the projected outcomes. The aliens listened in silence. When he finished, Commander spoke first. "Your calculations show a 0.03% chance of success." "That's not zero," replied. "It's close enough," Riss said. "And your models show a 94% chance that the antimatter injection will accelerate the collapse. You could make things worse. Much worse." "We know the risks," said. "Do you?" Riss stood, her wings spreading wide. "Because I don't think you understand what you're proposing. You want to fly a ship carrying enough antimatter to destroy a planet straight into an unstable star. You want to inject that antimatter into the core, where temperatures exceed millions of degrees. And you want to do this with timing so precise that an error of even 1 microsecond could be catastrophic." "Yes," said simply. "That's exactly what we want to do." The council chamber erupted in noise again. Aliens shouting that the humans were insane, that they would kill everyone, that this plan was suicide. Commander raised his voice above the chaos. "I am ordering your team to stop this immediately. You will stand down and prepare for evacuation with everyone else." "No," said. The chamber went silent. No one refused a direct order from the commander. "No," repeated his voice dangerous. "We're doing this," said. "With or without your permission. You can try to stop us, but we both know you won't. Because there's a small chance we might actually succeed. And that chance, however small, is better than accepting that half the colony will die." His claws extended and for a moment thought they might actually attack him, but Riss stepped between them. "If you attempt this," she said too, "and you fail, I will have every human on your team arrested for endangering the colony. Is that clear?" "Crystal clear," replied. That night, Dr. Aura came to the human section of the station. She looked around nervously, as if afraid of being seen. She approached his workstation and placed a data chip on the desk. "What's this?" he asked. "Classified research," Ara said quietly. "We attempted stellar stabilization 40 years ago. We failed, but our data might help you avoid some of our mistakes." Looked at the data chip, then at Ara. "You could get in serious trouble for this." "I know." The scientist's skin shifted to a deep purple, a sign of strong emotion. "But you humans are trying to save everyone, not just yourselves. Everyone. That deserves support, even if it means breaking some rules." After Ara left, loaded the data. It was extensive, detailed, and exactly what they needed. They had tried a different approach, but their failure points showed where the biggest risks were. She called into her station. Together, they worked through the night, integrating the research with their own calculations. By morning, they had refined the plan. The success chance had improved to 0.08%. Still nearly impossible, but slightly less impossible than before. "We're ready," said to the team. "We launch in 48 hours. Around him, exhausted humans nodded. Some of them looked scared. Most of them looked determined. None of them looked like they were going to back down. "We've got this," someone said from the back of the room. It became their motto. Whenever things looked bad, whenever the calculations failed, whenever they wanted to give up, someone would say it. "We've got this." And somehow they kept believing it. Checked the ship's systems for the 5th time. Everything looked good. Or at least, everything looked as good as it could look when you were about to fly into a dying star carrying enough antimatter to destroy a small moon. "You don't have to do this," said, standing beside the pilot's chair. "We can find someone else." Laughed. He was the youngest pilot on the human team, only 26 years old. Some people said he was reckless, preferred to think of himself as confident. "Are you kidding? This is the craziest thing anyone has ever tried to fly. I wouldn't miss it for anything." The ship was a modified cargo hauler, stripped down and rebuilt for this one impossible mission. It had reinforced shields, extra cooling systems, and storage pods filled with carefully contained antimatter. It was not designed to fly into a star. But then again, no ship was. On the orbital station, watched the countdown clock. 45 minutes until launch. She checked her screens, monitoring the positions of every ship, every probe, every piece of equipment they would need. Her military training had taught her that success came from preparation and timing. She was about to find out if that was true when you were trying to save a son. "All teams status check," she said into her comm. Responses came back one by one. Engineering team ready, navigation ready, medical ready, calculation team ready. "We're as ready as we'll ever be," said. She was at the main science station, surrounded by displays showing the star's behavior. The numbers were getting worse. The collapse was accelerating. If they waited much longer, it might be too late. Commander entered the command deck. He looked at the humans preparing for launch, and his expression was unreadable. "This is your last chance to stop this madness," he said. "The evacuation fleet will arrive in 2 weeks. You could still save yourselves." "We're not stopping," said. His tail swished in frustration. "Then I am officially declaring this an unauthorized operation. When you fail, you will be held responsible." "If we fail, we'll all be dead," pointed out. "So your arrest warrants won't matter much." An old entered the command deck. Instructor X had lived for 400 years. He had seen empires rise and fall, watched species evolve and go extinct. His wings were faded with age and he moved slowly, but his mind was still sharp. "I wish to observe," he said in his ancient, clicking voice. "I have seen many things in my long life. I would like to see if humans can accomplish the impossible before I die." Riss nodded, allowing him to stay. The countdown reached 15 minutes, sealed his flight suit and settled into the pilot's seat. The ship's engines hummed to life. Through the cockpit window, he could see the star, looking deceptively peaceful. Getting excited readings from the star's corona, reported. Magnetic storms forming. You're going to have rough flying. I've flown through worse, lied. He definitely had not flown through worse. Nobody had. 10 minutes, announced. Down in the medical bay, Sarah refused to evacuate. She was the senior medical officer, and several of the human team members had told her to get on a shuttle to safety. She had ignored them all. If this goes wrong, you'll need a doctor, she had said. I'm staying. Now she checked her supplies, preparing for every possible emergency. Burns from radiation, decompression injuries, system shock. She had medicines and equipment ready for all of it, though she knew that if the star exploded, no amount of medicine would help. 5 minutes, said. Her voice was steady, but her hands gripped the edge of her console. The Galactic Council had evacuated most of the colony's population to the far side of the planet. If something went wrong, if the star's collapse accelerated, they would have a few extra minutes to escape. Not much, but better than nothing. Thousands of aliens watched the human team on their screens, waiting to see what would happen. Most expected disaster. A few hoped for a miracle. 1 minute, said. Stood beside at the science station. She was running final calculations, her fingers dancing across the controls. The timing has to be perfect, she said. The star's core is pulsing in a specific rhythm. We need to inject the antimatter at the peak of each pulse. Can you do it? Asked. I guess we're about to find out. 30 seconds. His hands were on the flight controls. The ship was ready. He was ready, or as ready as anyone could be for something like this. 10 seconds. The command deck was silent except for the countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, launch. Fired the engines. The ship shot forward, accelerating toward the star. The G-forces pushed him back into his seat, but he kept his hands steady on the controls. Looking good so far, he reported, entering outer corona in 30 seconds. On the station, watched the telemetry data streaming from ship. The temperature readings were climbing fast, shields holding at 78%. The ship plunged into the star's outer atmosphere. Immediately, everything went wrong. A massive magnetic storm caught the ship, throwing it off course. Alarms blared in the cockpit. The shields dropped to 40% in seconds. I've got heavy turbulence, shouted. He fought the controls, trying to keep the ship on course. Outside the windows, solar plasma swirled in violent reds and oranges. Adjust heading by 4 degrees, said, recalculating frantically. You need to avoid that magnetic field line. Pulled hard on the controls. The ship groaned but obeyed. He skirted around the worst of the storm, but the shields were down to 22%. I'm not going to make it at this rate, he said. The temperature in the cockpit was rising despite the cooling systems running at maximum. Yes, you are, said firmly. Reduce speed by 30%. You'll have more time for the shields to recover. That puts me behind schedule, protested. I'll adjust the injection timing, said. Just keep that ship in one piece. Reduced speed. The shield slowly climbed back to 34%. It would have to be enough. Approaching first injection point, he reported. Ready on your mark. Watch 3 different screens simultaneously. One showed the star's core pulses. One showed its position. One showed the antimatter payload status. She had one chance to get this right. 3 seconds, she said. 2, 1, inject now. Press the release button. A stream of antimatter shot out from the ship, diving deeper into the star's core. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the star screamed. A massive flare erupted from the core, racing outward faster than anything had ever seen. It caught his ship and threw it tumbling through space. Shields at 4%, he yelled, fighting to regain control. Hull breaches on decks 2 and 3. On the station, alarms were sounding everywhere. The sensor readings were going insane. The injection triggered a cascade reaction, said, her face pale. It's spreading through the entire core structure. Is that good or bad? Demanded. I don't know. Commander stood up, his voice cutting through the chaos. Abort the mission. Get that pilot out of there now before he's killed. We're not aborting, said. Can you make it to the second injection point? Through the static and noise, his voice came back. Shields are almost gone. Hull temperature is critical, but yeah, I can make it. Are you insane? Roared. That ship will be destroyed. Probably, agreed. But I'm going to get to that injection point first. The ship limped through the star's atmosphere. Warning lights flashed in every color. The cooling systems were failing. Parts of the hull were literally melting. But kept flying. Approaching second injection point, he said. His voice sounded strange, probably from heat exhaustion. Standing by for your mark. Looked at her calculations one more time. The first injection had caused unexpected changes in the core. She had to adjust everything on the fly. Her hands moved across the controls, changing numbers, updating predictions. Saw her face and realized she was terrified. Can you do this? He asked quietly. I have to, she replied. Ready, she said. This one has to be perfect. If the timing is off by even a fraction of a second, the whole star could go critical. No pressure then, said. Through his cockpit window he could see the star's core, a ball of impossible heat and light. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. 5 seconds, said. Her voice was shaking now. 4, 3, 2, 1, inject. Hit the button. The second antimatter payload launched into the core. For 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the star exploded. Light filled every screen on the station. The sensors overloaded and went blank. The entire command deck was bathed in blinding white light. Someone was screaming, realized it was Riss. When the light faded, the sensors slowly came back online, but the readings made no sense. Everything was static and chaos. Ship was gone. The telemetry feed showed nothing but dead space. Called into the comm, respond. Only silence answered. Instructor X stared at the screens with his ancient eyes. By the stars, he whispered, what have they done? 3 days passed in silence. The star was hidden behind a cloud of debris and radiation so thick that no sensor could penetrate it. Ship had vanished into that cloud, and no one had heard from him since. Most people assumed he was dead. Hadn't slept since the explosion. He sat at his workstation, staring at blank screens, waiting for data that wouldn't come. Around him, the other humans moved like ghosts, speaking in whispers, afraid to hope and afraid to give up. Was the worst. She blamed herself for everything. The calculations were wrong, she kept saying. I should have seen it, I should have known. You did everything right, told her for the 100th time, but she didn't believe him. How could she, when was gone and the star was dying? The colony was in chaos. Half the aliens had already boarded evacuation ships, not willing to wait and see what happened. The other half were demanding that the humans be arrested for making everything worse. Commander had tried to detain the human team, but Riss stopped him. Leave them alone, she said quietly. They tried their best. Now we wait to see if they succeeded or destroyed us all. On the 3rd morning, a young human girl walked into the command deck. Her name was, and she was only 17 years old. She was a mathematics prodigy, so brilliant that the colony's universities were fighting over her. But right now, she just looked like a scared teenager. I solved it, she said too. Looked up from her screens. Her eyes were red from crying and lack of sleep. Solved what? The equation you were working on, the one about the core reactions. Held out a tablet. You were using traditional stellar models, but those don't work for a collapsing star. I tried using chaos mathematics instead. Look. Took the tablet. She stared at the equations for a long moment. Then her eyes went wide. This changes everything. If your calculations are right, the explosion wasn't a failure. It was exactly what needed to happen. I'm not sure I'm right, admitted. I'm just a student, but the math works out. Came over to look. He wasn't a physicist, but he understood enough to see what had done. She had approached the problem from a completely different angle than any trained scientist would have used. This is brilliant, he said, but we still can't see anything. The debris cloud is too thick. Wait, said the human communications specialist. He had been quietly working at his station for 3 days, trying everything he could think of to contact. I'm getting something. Everyone turned to look at him. The command deck, which had been half empty, suddenly filled with people. Aliens and humans crowded around station. It's very faint, said, adjusting his equipment. There's too much interference, but I think, yes, there's definitely something out there transmitting. What kind of transmission? Riss demanded, pushing through the crowd. I can't tell yet, give me a minute. His fingers flew across his controls. He routed the signal through different filters, trying to clean it up. It's repeating. Same pattern over and over. It's either automated or... The signal suddenly cleared. A voice came through, weak and broken up by static, but unmistakably human. Is a ship damaged but core injection successful? The command deck erupted in noise. Humans were shouting and hugging each other. Some were crying. Even a few of the aliens looked relieved. He's alive, yelled. She was laughing and crying at the same time. That crazy pilot is alive. Everyone be quiet, Commander ordered. When the noise died down, he spoke into the comm. This is command. What is your status? More static than's voice came back stronger. Status is, well, I'm alive, which is nice. Ship is pretty much destroyed. Life support is failing. Shields are gone, but I'm floating here looking at the star and you're not going to believe this. Believe what? Riss asked. The star's not collapsing anymore, said. I'm watching the core readings from here. It's stabilizing. The antimatter injections worked. Grabbed her controls and started pulling up sensor data. It was still hard to see through the debris, but as she focused the scanners on specific wavelengths, the picture became clearer. The star was still there, and it wasn't dying. He's right, she said, her voice shaking. The collapse has stopped. The core temperature is rising. Fusion reactions are resuming. It's working. The aliens in the command deck stared at the screens in disbelief. Instructor X moved closer, his ancient eyes studying the data. Impossible, he murmured. The energy release from the explosion should have accelerated the collapse. Instead, it somehow triggered a stabilization cascade. How? Stepped forward nervously. I think I can explain. The traditional models assume stellar behavior is linear and predictable, but during collapse, stars become chaotic systems. Small changes can have huge effects. The humans didn't just inject antimatter randomly. They timed it to match the core's natural pulses. That timing, combined with the energy release, created a feedback loop that reinforced the fusion reactions instead of disrupting them. But that would require understanding chaos mathematics at a level we've never achieved, said Dr. Ara, the scientist. How did you calculate the timing? Looked embarrassed. Honestly, we didn't calculate it perfectly. We made our best guess based on incomplete data and then adjusted on the fly when things went wrong. You guessed. Commander looked like he might explode himself. You guessed when attempting stellar engineering. Not just guessed, corrected. We made educated guesses based on probability analysis and real-time observation. We adapted. That's not how science works, protested a scientist. Maybe not how your science works, said, but it's how human science works when we don't have time for perfection. Over the next few hours, the debris cloud began to clear. The sensor readings became stronger and more detailed, and what they showed was impossible. The star wasn't just stable, it was getting stronger. The fusion reactions in the core were accelerating in a controlled way, like a fire that had been dying suddenly receiving fresh fuel. The star's mass was still lower than it should be, but it was no longer losing matter. Instead, it was beginning to generate energy more efficiently. "It's going to live," said, tears running down her face. "The star is going to live." A rescue ship was dispatched to retrieve. When they finally brought him back to the station, he could barely walk. He had radiation burns across 30% of his body. His lungs were damaged from breathing recycled air through failing systems. But he was grinning. "Told you I could make it," he said before Sara and her medical team rushed him to the hospital. Grand Admiral N arrived from the Galactic Fleet 2 weeks later. He was a legendary figure, a who had commanded fleets for 50 years. He came to see the impossible star and to question the humans who had saved it. He stood on the observation deck, looking at the sun through the windows. It burned bright and steady, more vibrant than it had been before the crisis began. "I've read the reports," he said to Anne. "I've reviewed the calculations. I've spoken to your team members, and I still don't understand how you did this." "To be honest, neither do we," admitted. "We had a theory and we tried it. We made mistakes, we adapted, and somehow it worked." "But that's not how breakthrough science happens," N said. "Revolutionary discoveries require years of careful research, testing, and peer review." "Maybe for you," said. "But humans are good at working under pressure. We're good at improvising. When we don't have time to do things the right way, we do them the fast way and hope we get lucky." N turned to look at them. His reptilian face was hard to read, but his voice was thoughtful. "You didn't just save yourselves. You saved every species on this colony. 40 different civilizations owe you their lives. The Galactic Council will want to honor you." "We don't need honors," said. "We just need to make sure everyone remembers what happened here." "What do you mean?" N asked. "Remember that humans said, 'We've got this,' when everyone else said it was impossible," said. "Remember that sometimes the impossible just needs someone willing to try." Ambassador Riss approached them. She looked different than she had before, somehow humbler. "I owe you an apology," she said. "I doubted you, I tried to stop you, I was wrong." "You were being careful," said. "That's not wrong, we're just not very good at being careful." "Clearly," Riss said, but she was almost smiling. "Your species is either brilliant or insane. I'm still not sure which." "Why not both?" suggested, and everyone laughed. 2 weeks after the star stabilized, scientists from across the galaxy arrived at the colony. They came to study what the humans had done, to understand how something impossible had become possible. The star wasn't just stable anymore. It was thriving. The fusion reactions were more efficient than they had been before the crisis. The star burned brighter, producing more energy with less mass. It was as if the near-death experience had somehow made it healthier. Dr. Ara led the investigation into the human methods. She interviewed every team member, reviewed every calculation, studied every decision they had made. What she discovered changed everything she thought she knew about science. "You didn't follow any established protocols," she said too, reviewing the data for the 10th time. "You used incomplete information. You made assumptions that any proper scientist would reject. You improvised constantly, and somehow it worked." "That's what we do," said simply. "When we don't have enough information, we make educated guesses. When things go wrong, we adapt. We don't wait for perfect conditions because perfect conditions never come." "But this approach should fail," Ara insisted. "Statistically, attempting complex operations with incomplete data should result in catastrophic failure." "Maybe for systems that can't handle failure," said, joining the conversation. "But we built redundancy into everything. We knew we'd make mistakes, so we planned for them. Every calculation had backup alternatives. Every system had. We didn't try to be perfect. We tried to be flexible." A mathematics professor studied chaos equations. "This is revolutionary," he said, his mandibles clicking in excitement. "You've applied probability cascades to stellar mechanics in a way we never considered, but this isn't taught in any curriculum. Where did you learn this approach? Shrugged, she still looked uncomfortable with all the attention. I didn't learn it anywhere. I just thought about the problem differently. Traditional stellar models treat stars like machines with predictable behavior. But I thought, what if stars are more like weather systems? Chaotic, but with patterns you can predict if you look at them the right way. A 17-year-old human developed a new branch of stellar mathematics by thinking about it differently, the professor said in amazement. This would take our best scientists decades to accomplish. Maybe that's the problem, suggested. Maybe your scientists think too much and try too little. The comment was meant as a joke, but it sparked serious discussion throughout the scientific community. Instructor X called a special meeting of the Galactic Council. Every major species sent representatives. The council chamber was more crowded than it had been in decades. I have lived for 400 years, X began. His ancient voice echoed through the hall. I have witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. I have seen technological marvels and terrible disasters, but I have never seen anything like what these humans accomplished. He gestured to where the human team sat. They looked uncomfortable, still wearing their work clothes, looking out of place among the formal alien delegations. For 10,000 years, the Galactic Council has believed that careful methodology produces the best results, X continued. We test thoroughly. We analyze extensively. We eliminate risk. This approach has served us well. It has prevented disasters and saved countless lives. But it has also made us slow, cautious, unable to act quickly when action is needed. These humans showed us a different way. They showed us recklessness, Commander objected. They risked everyone's lives on a plan with a failure rate of over 94%. They showed us courage, X corrected. There is a difference. Recklessness is taking foolish risks for no reason. Courage is taking calculated risks when the alternative is unacceptable. The humans didn't just save themselves, Riss added. She stood beside X and her voice carried authority. They refused to accept that half of us had to die. When we began calculating who was valuable enough to save, they said no. Everyone deserves to be saved, so they found a way to save everyone. At tremendous risk, repeated. Yes, agreed, standing up. We took a huge risk. And you know what? We'd do it again. Because the alternative was choosing who lives and who dies based on genetic value and usefulness. That's not a decision any species should have to make. But your approach was chaotic, a delegate argued. You had no structure, no discipline, you just tried things until something worked. That's not quite true, said. She stood beside, her military posture straight and confident. We had structure. It just looked different from yours. We divided into teams, each with specific responsibilities. We maintained communication. We adapted our plans based on real-time information. That's not chaos. That's adaptive strategy. You worked 18 to 20-hour shifts, the continued. You pushed your bodies beyond safe limits. You used drugs to stay awake. This is not healthy or sustainable. You're right, Sara said from the medical section. It's not sustainable long-term, but it worked for the short term, which was all we needed. We knew we couldn't maintain that pace forever, but we could maintain it for 3 weeks, so we did. I want to understand this better, Grand Admiral N said. He had been listening quietly until now. You humans approach problems fundamentally differently than other species. Why? The humans looked at each other, finally spoke up. Maybe it's because humans evolved differently. Most of you came from worlds where survival meant being careful, avoiding predators, following proven strategies, but humans evolved as persistence hunters. We didn't outrun our prey or overpower them. We just kept chasing them until they collapsed from exhaustion. We're built to keep going when everyone else gives up. That's part of it, added. But I think it's also cultural. Human history is full of people attempting impossible things. Sometimes they failed. But sometimes they succeeded, and when they did, they changed the world. We've sent people to walk on our moon. We've split atoms and mapped our own DNA. We've always believed that impossible just means no one's done it yet. This explains much, X said thoughtfully. But it also creates a problem for the Galactic Council. We want to learn from your success. We want other species to understand your methods, but your approach seems to rely on characteristics unique to humans. Not unique, said. Just different. Every species has strengths, are incredibly precise, are masters of strategy, understand art and creativity in ways humans never could. What we did wasn't about being better than anyone else. It was about using our particular strengths for a particular problem. He's right, Dr. Ara said, standing. I've been studying the human approach in detail. What they did wasn't magic. It was a combination of several factors that other species could learn from. They integrated multiple disciplines simultaneously instead of sequentially. They built redundancy into every system. They empowered individual team members to make decisions without waiting for approval from authorities. And they accepted uncertainty as part of the process rather than something to be eliminated. That last point is crucial, added nervously. When you try to eliminate all uncertainty, you also eliminate flexibility. The humans succeeded because they expected things to go wrong and built systems that could handle unexpected problems. Grand Admiral N stood and addressed the entire council. I have made a decision. I am recommending to the Galactic Fleet that humans be given leadership positions in all emergency engineering operations, not because they are better than other species, but because they have skills we desperately need. I support this recommendation, Riss said. Furthermore, I propose that human problem-solving methods be studied and taught throughout the galaxy, not to replace our existing approaches, but to supplement them. The council debated for hours. Some delegates argued that human methods were too dangerous to adopt. Others insisted that the success spoke for itself. Finally, they voted. The resolution passed by a narrow margin. Humans would be integrated into galactic emergency response teams. Their methods would be studied and taught, and a new field of research would be established, adaptive problem-solving under extreme constraints. That evening, the human team gathered on the observation deck. They looked out at the star they had saved, burning bright and steady in the darkness. "We did it," said quietly. "We actually did it." Never doubted us for a second, said. He was out of the hospital now, though he still had bandages visible under his clothes. "Okay, I doubted us constantly, but we did it anyway." "They're going to want us to do more stuff like this," observed. "Impossible missions, desperate situations, problems no one else can solve." "Good," said. "That's what we're good at." "Saving dying stars?" asked. "No, refusing to give up when everyone else says it's hopeless." Arrived with a tray of drinks. "I thought we should celebrate. I managed to find some actual Earth coffee. No idea how old it is, but it should still be good." They passed around the cups, savoring the familiar taste of home. "What do you think happens next?" Sora asked. "More impossible problems," said with a smile. "More people telling us we can't do something. More chances to prove them wrong." "Sound exhausting," said. "Probably," agreed. "But someone has to do it, might as well be us." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching their star. Somewhere in the colony, aliens were still debating the implications of what humans had accomplished. Scientists were writing papers. Politicians were making speeches. Philosophers were questioning everything they thought they knew about possibility and impossibility. But the human team wasn't thinking about any of that. They were just glad to be alive, glad they had succeeded, and already wondering what impossible thing they would attempt next. Commander found them there an hour later. He stood in the doorway, watching them for a moment before speaking. "I came to apologize," he said finally. "I tried to stop you. I called your plan insane. I was wrong." "You were being careful," said. "Someone needs to be careful. Otherwise, humans would probably blow up half the galaxy by accident. His tail swished in what might have been amusement. Perhaps, but the galaxy needs both approaches, careful planning and bold action, my species and yours. Working together, suggested. If you can tolerate our caution and we can tolerate your chaos, yes, working together. They shook hands, human and, sealing an alliance built on mutual respect and shared survival. As Left raised her coffee cup, I propose a toast to humans, to our alien friends, and to proving that impossible just means it hasn't been done yet. They clinked their cups together and drank. Outside the window, the star burned bright, a star that should have died, a star that humans had promised to save with nothing but determination, improvisation, and stubborn refusal to accept defeat. They had said, "We've got this," when no one believed them. And they had been right. The galaxy would never underestimate humans again, not their creativity, not their courage, and definitely not their willingness to attempt the impossible. Because sometimes, the impossible just needs someone brave enough to try. And humans, for better or worse, were always willing to try.